Thank you. Good to be here. That's right. If anyone's going to, anyone lives in China. Yeah. Hello. How's everyone doing? Yeah, I'm here. Well, I can do a lecture. That's what it takes. But it'd be nice to have the audio going. Or
Is my audio coming through now, folks? Testing, 1, 2. Anybody, my audio?
is this on YouTube, Jan?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're live, and apparently my audio is out. Okay, now, yes. Okay, so we are up. Anyway, we'll just start over since, well, that was a big foobar, but anyway, this is Gnostic Media's UnSpun episode number 85. We're back today with Dr. Hans Utter. Hans had a lot to present. He's got to catch a flight tonight in about 4 hours. He had a lot more information to present. I appreciate everybody who donated to the show last week, mailed, used the little donation button in the chat group, as well as from the website. And anyway, everything appears to be up now. Everybody seems to be happy, I hope. So I appreciate everybody's feedback. I didn't have the chat window showing, so I missed that. So we lost about 3 or 4 minutes there, but we are back. Hans, you have a lot of work to present, so I'm going to let you have it so we can get through as much as possible. But anyway, thanks for coming back and appreciate your time.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it's good to be here. I'll be playing in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So anyone lives out there, drop me a line. See what it's like. It should be fun, you know. Who knows? Maybe I'm going to be kidnapped by aliens, and but I think it should be a good trip there to the South. I always like the South, even though it's facing a second Civil War at this time. But yeah. Anyways, so hope everyone's doing well, and I'm trying to get through this topic in a way that I think is somewhat coherent and cogent. So basically, the 4 main things I'll be looking at today: first, finish up with William S. Burroughs, look a little bit more, just a brief amount on the neuroscience stuff to try to clarify that, talk about John Lilly and programming and reprogramming the human biocomputer, and that ties into some of these Macy conferences, and then look at some very concrete examples of how what I'm talking about is employed or deployed. And then finally look at some strategies or methodologies to not only be aware of this stuff, but also to counteract it. And one of the sort of the nice things or fun things about this is that, you know, in no way I'm implying that, say, through background music or media, people are, you know, programmed MK Ultra robots and you hear a song and start something. However, there are a lot of trigger patterns, and once you understand a bit of the design of this, and then you look at media consolidation, and you look at the the vast amount of research being done, and you look at game theory in that you can get a predictable outcome in 2-3 different potential states, it starts to make more sense. So I think the biggest thing is to use this as sort of a way to gain greater understanding, and then also to, I think, for myself, as I've been kind of looking into this, I've been able to gain some greater understanding myself, and sort of understand some of these things. Because if you look at it now, I don't personally believe that human beings are just programmable biological computers, as William S. Burroughs says, soft machines, right? We're not just tape recorders. However, there is a lot that can be triggered. There's a lot of patterns, or a lot of networks, associational networks, that can be set up, and that can be triggered or can be reenacted, right? And I think that just being aware of this stuff and the cultural milieu, I mean, one of the good things is that it's become so organized, right? It's become so unified in terms of what's going on across every level of the media. I watched TV yesterday, one of the rare times, and just noticing even how ads are coordinated across TV channels, right? Even everything. So this whole design of this is certainly, deliberate. Now, we also have to understand there's multiple agendas, there's multiple players, there's multiple, things that are going on, right? You've got the people that are basically just trying to do their job according to what they're specified they have to do. You've got middlemen, and then you have, as I call, the architect level, the architectural level, which is the theorization, right, that allows this to happen. And when you go into the theorization level and the logistical element of how this stuff is working, then it gets a bit complex, and that's one of the reasons is that you have to go through some pretty dense literature. So just to start out here, and real quick, to give an overview of the levels this stuff operates on, right? So we call the psychological level, which is psychological thought processes, emotions, memories. Cognitive, next level, how we think, how our thought processes are being formulated, how the mind is working. Then you have the neurological level, right, which is the effect on the actual neurons, right, in the brain and neural processes, right? And then you have the glandular level. So, for example, a fear response is going to activate the endocrine gland and things like that, right? So you have a level of where this is happening on the hormonal, say we call biophysiological level, right? So it's happening in a lot of different ways. So anyways, let's just go into William S. Burroughs, and I got some interesting new information. I was, trying to get a better grip on the guy, because initially I was going to use Philip K. Dick and William S. Burroughs just as ways to look at in the literature how this topic has been discussed, and I wasn't planning on seeing Burroughs as an intelligence operative and as a disciple of, Ewan Cameron and other people. But I do have a few letters where he talks about being recruited to work as an intelligence agent. So I will read some of his letters.
And I would love, you should probably show those on the screen too. I'd love to see those too.
Well, unfortunately, I've got my text printout, so but I'll give the dates and everything for that. But just to start out, so Burroughs, we talked about the cut-up technique, and one of the ways the cut-up technique works is what Ewan Cameron specified when he started using the tape recorders, was playing the patient's own statements back to them over and over and over again, right? So that was one of the central facets of his psychic driving and his techniques. So Jan, would you mind playing a little bit of this film? This is one of William S. Burroughs' films, done with Byron Geisen.
Byron Geisen?
Byron Geisen, yeah, see, there you go. That's yeah. Well, as you're doing that, so
It's
Hello.
already
Yes,
running here.
hello.
Look at that
Yes.
picture. Hello.
Okay, I'm not
Yes, hello.
Yes. Thank you. Hello. Does it
Yes,
seem to be
hello.
persisting? Yes.
Good.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Yes.
Where are we
Hello.
Yes,
Should I
hello.
be seeing it?
Yes.
Thank you.
It's
Hello.
showing.
Yes,
Okay. Is
hello.
audio going on?
Yes.
Yep.
Hello.
Yes,
The audience
hello.
can hear it.
Thank you. Yes. Hello.
Seem to be
Yes,
persisting.
hello.
Yes.
Good.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Yes. Hello.
Picture.
Yes, hello.
Good.
Yes. Hello.
Yes, hello.
How does it seem
Yes.
to you now?
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Thank you.
Yes. Hello.
Yes, hello.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yes,
Does it seem to be
hello.
persisting?
Yes. Hello.
Yes, hello.
Thank you.
Yes.
Where are we
Hello.
now?
Yes,
Good.
hello.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hello.
Look at that picture.
Yes, hello.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hello.
How
Yes,
does it seem to you
hello.
now?
Yes.
Good.
Hello.
Thank
Yes, hello.
you. Look at that
Yes.
picture.
Hello.
Good.
Yes,
Thank you.
hello.
Seem to be
Yes.
persisting.
Hello.
Good.
Yes,
Thank you.
hello.
Where are we
Yes.
now?
Hello.
Good.
Yes,
Does
hello.
it seem to be
Yes.
persisting?
Hello.
Good.
Yes,
Thank you.
hello.
Look at that
Yes.
picture.
Hello.
Good.
Yes,
Thank you.
hello.
How does it
Yes.
seem to you now?
Hello.
Good.
Yes,
Thank
hello.
you. Look at that
Yes.
picture.
Hello.
Good.
Yes,
Thank you.
hello.
Does it seem to be
Yes.
persisting?
Hello.
Good.
Yes,
Thank you.
hello.
Where are we now?
Yes.
Good.
Hello.
Thank you.
Yes,
Hello.
hello.
Yes.
Yes,
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Yes.
hello.
Hello.
Yes. Hello.
Yes, hello.
Yes.
hello.
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 Yes, hello.
Yes.
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Yes.
Yes. Hello.
Yes, hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes. Hello.
Yes. Hello.
Yes,
Yes.
hello.
Yes.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes. Hello.
Yes,
Yes.
hello.
Hello.
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Right now,
Yes.
I
Hello.
can't see it. You can
Yes.
stand
Hello.
it goes on like that for
Yeah,
like
that's pretty nauseating stuff there. Wow. You know, and you can see this sick pedophiles stuff leaking through as he's showing young naked boys and stuff and this whole thing and chopping up the tape recorder as we discussed last week with this stuff. But yeah, wow. You know, there's a peek into the mind of one of the CIA's psychopathic pedophiles.
Yeah, and you know what's again very interesting is that the this exactly mirrors Ewan Cameron's technique that he developed, you know, just a couple years before, you know, auto psychic driving, and then verbal cues that are expressed by other people are called heteropsychic driving. But the idea was playing these recordings back, and he saw how uncomfortable the patients got. So in this particular film, you have this, you know, repeated words, right? And then with the fracturing of temporal unity, right? So you have this, you know, cutting up of back and forth. But, you know, I mean, basically, this is Ewan Cameron, you know, as art, right? And, you know, as we look at this, so the creation of the dynamic implant, which Ewan Cameron terms the sort of autonomous mechanism, right, in the mind of the patient. So they'll continually do this process to themselves all the time. They will, you know, even new materials can come part of it, but this process of sort of psychic driving, this repetition of words, phrases, and numbers becomes implanted into the patient. Now, you know, again,
Sorry for that, audience. I should have probably stopped that after a few seconds of that crap.
yeah, well, it goes on. You know, I didn't see, I forget. It's like 20 something minutes, and it's the same two words, right, repeated. But all of his films are like that, right? And you know, as I mentioned before, I'm not going to read all the texts after slogging through, you know, sex with, you know, interspecial sex and all this other stuff. But he tells you these other passages are clearly delineated methods for how to do this stuff to yourself, how to record your own voice, how to start to fracture your own time perceptions, you know, play with frame rates and all this stuff. Flicker, you make your own dream machine, your own little flicker machine. You know, so kind of interesting.
And then comes the Beatles' White Album.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and of course, we have to mention that Burroughs, of course, was there on the cover of Sergeant Pepper's, right? So he was right
along with Crowley and every other, you know, agent, et cetera, out there.
Yeah, and so, When we look at Burroughs, again, okay, we have somebody who seems rather disturbed, who became a major influence in various genres of pop music, including having a very close personal relationship with Kurt Cobain, right? And grunge, many people consider grunge rock to be the last real sort of a rock genre. You know, that was kind of the end of the road. Everything's been recycled from this. And as we look at the statistics and data about this, we'll see that that is indeed the case. But Burroughs has a few other interesting things about him, one of them being that he constantly cites Hassani Saba, which I talked about in our previous interviews. He was connected with the Ismaili sect, the Hashishans, right, the assassins, who were, related to the Knights Templar. They're famous for basically inducing a type of mind control, of having types of, infiltration into various systems, into political systems, political networks, and suddenly when they got the cue, they would assassinate that person. And Hassani Saba stayed in this fortress called Alamut in Persian or Iran. And this was a core thing that came back over and over again. I could show you many other films of William S. Burroughs, where he talks about the last testament of Hassani Saba. But Hassani Saba ties into this connection between black magic, occult ritual, intelligence operations, mind control programming, right? And as well as the famous slogan, nothing is real, everything is permitted, nothing is true, everything is permitted, right? And this is Burroughs' slogan, and this is something that is sort of referred to quite a bit. So nothing is real, everything is permitted. Here you have the breakdown of any foundational sense of reality, of a concrete grounding. You could call the empirical grounding of the individual in the present, right? And that's what I want to emphasize, because all this stuff is based upon taking the individual out of the present and putting them, into a variety of temporally related distortions or disturbances. Okay. And so as we look at that, we see that Hassani Saba, not only being a major reference point for William S. Burroughs, was also the reason that he was recruited to be part of the IoT. And the IoT, the Illuminates of Thanta Eros, is a secret society, a secret occult organization. And you find a lot of things, erroneous information that he was part of the, OOO or Golden Dawn or whatever, but he was definitely part of the IoT. He was buried with his IoT ring. And the IoT ring, founded by Peter Carroll, had disciples such as Timothy Leary and many other ones, including possibly Peter Lamborn Wilson.
Yeah, it looks like Robert Anton Wilson shows up right there too. I don't have them all mapped, but of course,
you have the guy who wrote the Temporary Autonomous Zone, right?
that's Peter Lamborn Wilson, another pedophile.
And he's also associated with this, but Robert Anton Wilson definitely. But basically, we don't really know what they did because their work was kept in secret. But this is a type of chaos magic, which is exactly what we're seeing with the cut-up technique, which again, the reference to, let me just read this quote from the retired IoT official, which also stands for the Internet of Things, interestingly enough, right? Douglas Grant, quote, through a mutual interest in Hassan ibn Saba, a contact was made with William S. Burroughs. William expressed interest in the IoT and was subsequently initiated into the IoT by myself and another freighter and Soar. These are one of the 4 degrees of that organization. William did not receive an honorary degree. He was put through an evening of ritual that included a retro spell casting rite, an invocation of chaos, a Santeria rite, as well as a neophyte rite, inducting William into the IoT as a full member. So basically, Burroughs was, connected with, not only, as we'll look here when we see some of this other information, connected with intelligence circles, but also connected with occult circles. And he often talked about being possessed by the ugly spirit. The ugly spirit. And they said that's what possessed him when he shot his wife through the head, playing drunken William Tell in Mexico on tequila, and got out of jail. Didn't even go, went to jail for a few days. And basically he shot his wife through the head, and it didn't serve, any jail time, was completely released. But, some have speculated that was sort of his initiatory rite. But he said himself that was when the ugly spirit, quote unquote, this demon possessed him, right? And there's another video which we won't watch about the possessed, where this idea of possession is so central to William S. Burroughs. But as we look into some of the letters of William S. Burroughs written in Tangiers, and 1954, 1955. So Burroughs had an affair with Alan Turing. Alan Turing, you know who Alan Turing is, right, Alan?
Yeah, I do. Well, it's ringing a bell, but I'm not. Let me see if I can. Yeah, here it is.
Pioneer.
Let's see. MI6, algorithm, cryptography, digital computing. So I'm just pulling them up here. So anyway, now we have them on screen here.
Okay. So in these letters, you have to understand that you're going from this interzone, right? If anyone's seen the Naked Lunch film or read his work, interzone is sort of this space that we inhabit, right? It's sort of this drug-induced hallucinatory interpretation of our reality. So I'm just going to read a few quotes from some of his letters. December 26, 1954. By way of Sacco Chico color. Again, there's all these code words into Allen Ginsberg and Kerouac as well. I run into an Oxbridge chum of Brian's. That's, of course, Mr. Brian, who will talk about his work with
Brian Geisen?
Yeah, Brian Geisen. At the Cafe Central last night, a math professor type. I know him from the summer, but hardly I recognize him, his face all dead and gray. Calls himself Zeno Medakaitis. But he talked like a full-on Brit boffin. Okay, Zeno thinks everything is a machine, says biology is programmable. And after I stand him do some cognacs, he unloads about his face. He says it's a fake, a meat disc he cultured in a pan, and it's grown onto him like lichen on a boulder. When he's talking, he picks off shreds of flesh from his cheeks. Okay. So
now, just to interrupt you really quickly, I've got some stuff up here on the screen, and it's, let's see, I believe this is a photograph of, and you'll get a kick out of this, agents William S. Burroughs, Gordon Wasson, Brian Geisen, and Albert Hoffman.
Yep. And as I mentioned, Leary was also a member of the IOT, this secret society. So, I won't read all of this stuff because some of it, it sounds like he goes into sometimes science fiction land, but my feeling after getting a little bit more information, I think some of these are coded letters, right? So they're coded in a way, but some of the stuff is not coded. So this is another from the same date to Jack Kerouac. Wild new career opportunities opening up. I am visited by a British secret agent man, Jonathan Hopper, and he is Scugger too. And I assume Scugger means he's a heroin addict. We conjugated last night, but I don't want to drag this in the gutter. Today with our inner Scug.
Conjugated would mean what specifically?
Well, let's say they may have had sex.
Yeah, I think that was homosexual sex, right? Isn't that what he's saying there?
Yep. Okay. And today, with our inner Scugs urging us on, Hopper offers me a British passport and a bale of kale if I will help him marshal a cadre of 64 street Scuggers living in the deep tent antennae to be housed in the basement of the British Embassy. Then he goes on to talk about nonlinear amplification. Basically, he's being offered a British passport, a full British passport. And of course, he shot his wife, right? He's killed his wife. He's even if you call that manslaughter, I was drunk and I put a bullet through her head. I mean, I don't care how much tequila you're drinking, how you're going to get a nice shot like that. Anyways, so he's offered a British passport. And he's now, if we look at MK Ultra, he's talking about working for this. Okay, I'll just keep going. The Scugs want to get our TEEP signals functioning for distance far in excess of 10 feet. The official reason for our project's projected Scugger mine hive will be to track the doings of Professor Turing 4,000 miles away. One supposes that a hum, nonlinear amplification is called for. Last night, Turing went to Gibraltar to catch a ship bound for the land of the free. Turing and I have this creepy plan that the professor visit my parents in Palm Beach, having shape chiseled exactly to look like yours truly, and also carrying my passport. So, Jack, if you meet me, it is not me you meet. So it keeps going on and on, right? But what he's talking about, this idea, first of all, he is basically being paid. He had an affair with Alan Turing. Alan Turing stayed with him in Tangiers. Alan Turing, so the MI6 is hiring him to spy on Alan Turing. And then, basically he's talking about developing type of, mind reading, telekinetic stuff, whatever. But let's be honest too. This has also been studied, right? The idea of remote mind reading, all this stuff, part of the government projects. But now we notice some of these metaphors, and he talks about then he gets a job at the British Embassy. So Burroughs is working at the British Embassy, and he says that the boss of the British Embassy decides to overlook his extensive criminal record. Let's see, His Majesty is but do make a happy face, Bill. I've half a mind to invite you to consult for Her Majesty's Secret Service. Cushy work indeed, but I say you look all in. So this is from Hopper, who I have not managed to find out who that actually is. But obviously, we have...
it's Burroughs' handler, whomever the guy is.
Yeah, but the fact is that, and Chief Soames is the boss that decides to overlook his criminal record, and he gets a job in the British Embassy.
Overlook his quote-unquote extensive criminal record, which would include pedophilia and multiple murders and all else, and included in that with all of his heroin and drug arrests and all, I would imagine.
Yeah, and so this agent, I'll just read one last quote from this letter. He's talking about the agent Hopper, which is, in this case, I think scuggery could also mean homosexuality or pedophilia, possibly. So I'll read this quote. Quote, imagine the violence my inner dialectic, Hopper tells me, very intense as he uses a puddled finger to mop up the last crumbs of our indescribably toothsome English candy. As a government agent, I want you to exploit Turing like a slave. But as a scugger, I want him to spread his condition to your homeland. See, how do I resolve my conflict? I make a bid for fuller communication. So right there, we have this idea of wearing masks, of tearing the face off, of having, you can put in a science fiction metaphor of, having a different meat implant on your soft machine. But basically, pretty much he's directly saying, I was invited to work for the British Embassy. I was having a homosexual affair with Alan Turing, which he describes in great detail. And Alan Turing was, kind of a nerdy guy. And I guess Burroughs basically, I don't know what term you want to use, but basically blew his mind, as we said. So,
well, congratulations in exposing that William Burroughs was MI6 as well. We had him pegged as CIA for sure, but this is... great stuff. Good job, Hans, for, flushing out primary documentation on that.
Yeah. And then let's look at it. This is something you forwarded me on. I think it was sent in by a listener, right? And this is Felicity Mason Ann Cumming, who was a very good friend of Brian Geisen and William Burroughs, known as a sexual tourist, known as what they called her, the Randy Granny, when she published her memoirs. But let me just read some of these quotations from her interview. Quote, yes, well after, and this is about Brian. Yes, well after the Paris period, he came to New York working with Irene Sharaf, Sharaff. Then the war broke out, and we both did war jobs. I went into the intelligence service. Byron, for a time, a very short time, worked as a welder on battleships. Then he, too, went into the intelligence, the American intelligence. I was in British intelligence. By this time, he decided he would be an American, and he joined the American Armed Forces, which gave him American nationality. And he joined the American Armed Forces. Then he became an American citizen. During the war, he learned Japanese and was an interpreter with Japanese prisoners. That was his war situation. The questioner, what did you do? I worked for British intelligence in New York City until the Americans came into the war. Okay, so this is major, cutting edge sex, whatever, free love. She basically said she could not get off from a man unless there's at least two men there, if not more. But her answer, Felicity Mason, Ann Cumming, I worked for British intelligence in New York City until the Americans came into the war. We did a lot of intelligence for you because we were supposed to be neutral. I worked for the British Security Council, which is just a front for British intelligence. At one time, I worked in decoding ciphers and was decoding messages between Roosevelt and Churchill. After Pearl Harbor, you came into the war, and that whole section was taken over by your intelligence service. Then I went back to England in the middle of the war by convoy. That's my story. Byron went to Europe immediately after the war, back to Paris, where he had been before, and eventually he got to Tangiers. So she's wandering between these different groups, these avant-garde intellectuals, these dances, right? She even talks about the boule jalod, which is a type of dance, and it was similar to the twist. And, quote, we were laughing about the fact that it was very similar to the twist. And I remember doing the twist and all laughing. But it goes on and on. Byron himself had the cultural background and knowledge to appreciate and realize it for what it was. It was really the rites of Pan. So we're talking about, let's look at a pop cultural dance, right? The twist. In the 1950s, she's tying it to a shamanic dance in Morocco and saying, Brian, intelligence operative, said it in reality it was the rites of Pan. This ties back into Crowley, this idea. He ran his pop cultural groups, right? Running all of these. He ran a ragtime band. The idea was with his Golden Beetle. Go ahead.
Okay, so years ago I interviewed this guy, Alan, I forget his name, and I presume he was also counterintelligence, and selling this whole agenda. I have no proof. That's my own personal opinion, and catching him and some of the other things that we later exposed. But years ago he came on the show, and we did 2 parts on the goat of Hedron and this shamanic dance. And if you look at the progression, it appears that the goat of Hedron is also Pan. And so this would actually fit in with exactly what you're saying. Now, here's the interesting part is, there's a chance that information, he was in the circle with Carl Ruck and some of the other quote-unquote academics that we've exposed. And Carl Ruck, of course, worked with Gordon Wasson and Albert Hoffman, who worked with, drumroll, Brian Geisen. So it's a very tight little circle right there back to that thing. So I'm speculating that might be the connection, but I recommend people go back. It's probably 7-8 years ago, and check out the Goat of Hedron material in the Gnostic Media archives.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that, you have somebody, again, her memoirs, she was like a niacin, who was, sort of a lover of Henry Miller, who wrote, including a book talking about having sex with her father, and wrote all these erotic diaries. So this Cummings lady, is similar to that. And let's remember, Brian was also a Fulbright scholar. And let me just read a few more quotes from this interview about Brian. So she's also talking about some of these shamanic stuff, interest in particular type of talisman and occult magic. And then one thing I was wondering, this is the interviewer, one thing I was wondering was whether there were any other groups that interested Brian in, i.e. the Brotherhoods of Morocco. Quote, I don't know how interested Brian was in other groups, although he certainly must have come into contact with them with his particular interests, must have studied them and known quite a lot about them. Plus, his starts from his research into slavery, because the Arabs were great slave traders. Brian's Fulbright was to write a book about slavery, which he did. This is what first opened up the Arab world to him. An interest in slavery, mechanisms of control, and creating the ultimate means to shatter control. Let's go ahead and use the hallucinatory, strobic, photic driving effect. We have this thing I just discovered. I put this thing on my record player at going at frequency. I cut slits in it, and I can hallucinate witches. And then let's go ahead and use cut-up techniques where you say the same thing over and over again. Hello, my name is Hans, and just record that to yourself and listen back and forth at different speeds. And that's going to free yourself from the matrix. Great idea. Let me just continue. Okay, interviewer, I'm really glad you said that because I keep trying to make a connection in my mind between his interest in slavery, which he seemed just to drop once he had finished the book. Felicity Mason. Once he had written his book, he did drop it. It was for him a limited subject, which he wrote his Fulbright book. I know that Brian was still interested in slavery because there's a famous book about the east coast of Africa. I've read it myself, can't remember the title. Both Brian and William S. Burroughs, were very interested in that man's account, an American or English or French traveler who wrote about slave trading and then the assassins in Iran. Assassins in Iran means Hassani Saw, right? Which is the autonomous zone, the temporal autonomous zone, which is Burning Man, all right? Right there, direct connection to that. Yes, that's another one of his interests. Yes, that's another one of his interests, and they're also connected in some way with slavery. Physical slavery, mental slavery, mind control, right? So what Hassani Saba did was, the initiate would join the group, which is considered a template for ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And unfortunately, we don't have time to go into this two-volume ISIS Unveiled by Madame Blavatsky, which I've been reading. So I'll leave that for another time. But anyways, so what we have is this connections. And then she said interested in Spanish life and slave trade in general. And then he just which she keeps bringing up, the more became much more fascinating to him than slavery. So he just became this Arabist. He became an Orientalist, a scholar. But the interest in slavery and mind control. And then you have this exact same mind control system, which we talked about in great detail in our music mind control psychobiology system, interviews.
Series, yeah.
Series, I said system, so I'd say. So anyway, so that's just a little bit. So Burroughs, this is Burroughs' main influence. This is the guy that's doing these cut-up films. This is the guy that influenced him to write Naked Lunch. This is the guy that basically created William S. Burroughs' career. He wrote Junkie and Queer, which are basically, autobiographical things about his lifestyle. And notice the word scug. I assume it appears to refer to both heroin addiction and homosexuality, if not pedophilia.
Right.
Okay, so let's just continue. Now, this is just something, these are some quotes from a William S. Burroughs interview. I'll try to go through this quickly, but this shows his in-depth knowledge at a very early period of all this electronic weaponry of frequencies, etc. And again, this is William S. Burroughs, okay? The world is not noticeably short of lethal weapons, but a team of French scientists in Marseille is working on a death ray machine designed to provide an entirely novel method of human destruction. That project began when the electroacoustical laboratory moved into a building 3 years ago. Staff complained of headaches and nausea. Investigation began. Electromagnetic waves were suspected and eliminated. So were ultrasound waves. At this point, one of the technicians got out an antique apparatus for detecting infrasound. That is air vibrations, which oscillate at less than 10 vibrations a second or 10 hertz. And again, this is all Burroughs. The human ear registers as sound vibrations from 16 to 20,000 hertz. It has been used during the First World War to distinguish cannon fire movement of trains too far off to be unscrambled by ears. And then he goes on. As everyone knows, sound is a succession of waves in which the air is alternatively compressed and decompressed. Fast vibrations either go through solid objects or bounce off of them, usually doing relatively little harm, even when very powerful. But slow vibration beneath the hearing level can create sort of a pendulum action, a reverberation in solid objects that quickly builds up to intolerable intensity. So, but this is before we had the neuroscientific data about how this actually, the infrasound affected the brain, right? Directly affected the brain. And then he goes through all this technique. The first blast was audible to only 190 hertz, et cetera, et cetera. We're talking about, okay, the team had discovered that the wavelength most dangerous to human life is 7 hertz. At 7 hertz, turn on very softly, one has a vague impression of sound and a general feeling of discomfort. At 3.5 hertz, nothing can be heard directly, but there's a curious incidental effect. And then there's injuries, et cetera, and it goes on and on. This is Burroughs talking in detail with cutting-edge science in the mid-'60s about sonic and lethal weapons. And in fact, in Naked Lunch, he talks about, remote neural monitoring, remote implantation of voices in the head, voice-to-skull technology, et cetera. So I don't know about his literary stuff, which I have to say is pretty much shit. It's garbage. It actually, as he says himself, it's designed as a means to unfold one into sort of the apparatus, right? It's an initiatory process. Okay, I'll just jump ahead. We might have to go a little over time, or I'll just talk really fast. But anyways, so again, what we have here is Ewan Cameron, who worked. He wrote this book. I forget the name of it. Something like the Psychic Reconstruction of Germany. Right. His idea was how to stop the Germans from becoming fascist again. Right. So this was what he devised. All of this stuff, and then. Burroughs and these guys are immediately not only implementing the technology of the magnetic tape recorder, but implementing his exact techniques, right? But with, again, that added overlay, which goes back to John Dee, of this interconnection between drugs, mind control, occult practices, and intelligence, right? So if we look at the Macy conferences, starting from 1946, self-regulating and teleological mechanisms. So we look at teleological mechanisms. That means goal setting, right? That means how you move forward towards some objective. How do you see yourself in time related to another objective, right? So this is looking at the mechanisms that are and self-regulating, just like the dynamic implant, right? The dynamic implant, which is the implant of a self-regulating implanted, system. Okay, it's a psychological system. In this case, we're talking about something coming from the cognitive level, the perceptual level, that eventually affects all ranges, from neuronal activity to hormonal secretions, glandular activity, et cetera. So I think this is what we have to take into account. I'll just read some of these topics in 1946, which we see an exact correlate. Simulated neural networks emulating the calculus of propositional logic, anthropology and how computers might learn to learn, object perceptions, feedback mechanisms, how you see something, how you know you've seen something, right? How do you connect your sensory perceptions to the world around you? Perceptual differences due to brain damage. When can you no longer see the world around you? When has your mind been so influenced that you can no longer perceive your relationship to objects? And then, deriving ethics from science. And then the last topic, compulsive repetitive behavior. So this idea of repetition is a very core process, which Burroughs talks about over and over again, this idea of repeating. So the way you set yourself free from the control mechanism is just to repeat, hello, my name is Hans, hello, my name is Hans, playing at different speeds on tape recorders. And this mechanism of repetition and distortion is supposed to set you free from the control system. Yeah, right. Okay. And I can keep going on. 1946, October, teleological mechanisms in society, concepts from Gestalt psychology, tactile and chemical communication among ant soldiers. In 1948, formation of the I in language, formation of the self, right? This idea of the disillusion of the self. This is promoted across the board, right? At least for those in the know, right? Those who are trying to break free from the matrix, right? The revolutionaries, the smart people. You have to fracture your I. Your I is a conditioned mechanism. But of course, the way of fracturing it, according to Leary, Burroughs, and everyone else, is by creating new oversaturated environments of simulation, like the Merry Pranksters, right? Flashing lights, distorted voice things, loud music, oversaturated simulation. This is your way out, right? This is your way out. This is your way out, punk rock, et cetera, right? Burning Man, we can keep going on. Language symbols and neuroses, which is a very important thing. 1951. The application of game theory to psychic motivations. Right there we have the core crux of what I'm trying to assert here, is that the application of game theory, right, that you get psychic motivations. You're going to get a certain spread of percentage responses across the board when you start implementing these things on a large scale, right? And then but you're also going to get different responses. You're going to get, and then you can set up contingency plans or scenarios, right?
Predictive contingencies to fight and stop wherever somebody might come up or wake up or gain awareness from. So the trick is overcoming that awareness itself.
Yep, exactly. And this is so interesting because and then 1953. How neural mechanisms can recognize and shape musical chords. And then what consensus have the Macy conferences arrived at? So 1953 in Princeton, April, they finally settle on musical chords. Very interesting, right? I'll skip over some of these other topics. I'm sure you've gone over all the list of people that attended the Macy conference, et cetera. But
not all of them, but yeah, very many, and folks can find that in the brain database linked on the website.
Yep. So go ahead and jump in there, Jan, if you want to.
Well, here, let me just pull it up on the brain database here. But Macy conferences. So, what we can see here is the key game theorists and cyberneticists and, Gregory Bateson, who helped found the CIA, Humphrey Osmond, Aldous Huxley, who was a key architect of the MKUltra program. But the Macy conferences were key behind the, key to the creation or the founding of the CIA's MKUltra project, which we have right here, and we can follow all of these same people through that then go on to essentially implement this stuff. But I've only got some of the names mapped out here, but you can read the Macy Foundation book on cybernetics, and it lays out everything in there on what they were doing. But we can see the typical influences of the Tavistock Institute, the Frankfurt School, the CIA, American Jewish Committee, etc. And all of them just essentially from there go out via the MKUltra program to peddle this crap to the masses. Their new form of mind control based on us being computers or robots, essentially.
Yeah, biocomputers.
Soft biocomputers, exactly.
Yeah, and I'll just go over this real quick. So I had talked about temporal control last time. Temporal control is a relationship between the conditioned stimuli and the conditioned response, right? And the neural stimulus functions as a time cue, which in a sense reenacts this time space. So this particular space of time, period of time, becomes part of this extended condition response, right? And this goes back, at least in my estimation, to the organized replication of nostalgia, right? And I have all the graphs of all the repetition of these types of songs. For example, Mrs. Robinson, as of 2012, had been played over 6 million times in America. Interestingly, that was
Simon and Garfunkel.
Yep, yeah, Mrs. Robinson. And I'll go over all the songs. It's pretty interesting. But anyway, so what we have, temporal control, relating past stimuli to present events, protraction and retraction, forming of memories, judgments, actions, synchronous and asynchronous control over time exerted by conditioned stimulus to conditioned response, relation to environment, definition of the behavioral state as a connected set of equivalent histories. These are just my notes. I mean, there's a lot to go into. Synchronous and asynchronous control. Synchronous control means a type of control that's happening in real time with a real-time response. Asynchronous control is a delayed response, right? A delayed mechanism that can be triggered in various ways, right? And then we have the behavioral state as a connected set of equivalent histories. So what you have is this carryover process, equivalent histories. Now, this where it gets quite interesting, maybe a little bit deep, but if you look at media influence, right? Okay, for one of the first times in history, we have this almost totally consolidated culture, right? Look at all, you grew up watching Different Strokes. I'll try not to go out to, the Jeffersons, Three's Company, whatever, God knows, whatever. Those just came to my mind. Maybe that's a Pavlovian response, but all the sitcoms, all the movies, right? Think of how when you're younger, and this is when it's most profound, the influence, right? The movies, The Breakfast Club, maybe you guys think I'm an old, but, we can go on and on, right? Look at Easy Rider from the 1960s, how important that film was, right? So what you have here is what you get something called a situational control, definition of the behavioral state. So look at, I just watched some cartoons last night. I don't have a TV or, I don't have cable, but I watched some cartoons interesting to see the degradation, the show is called like Bob's Hamburger Stand, people, probably on Cartoon Network. But, you have everything from like homosexual incest to just a total debasement of the white male character just being debased to all kinds of, to S&M, et cetera, et cetera. But you have a behavioral state, right? You have a way you relate to yourself, to your family, to your peers, to emotions like love. If we look at all the pop songs and how these create narratives of relationship, of desire, and the most hard that I have relates to drug use, substance abuse, as promoted through film, music, and their combination, right? But this behavioral state, these equivalent histories mean that you start to get these responses. Say if you relate to, your parents, you see these shows where every time the dad is an idiot, he's a bumbling fool, right? This is getting funneled into your mind as you watch these shows.
Married with Children, Simpsons, et al. With that same theme.
Well, yeah, over the top. And so what you have is, and I'll go through media theory and in detail, but basically what you have is an equivalent history, right? You have a similar situation, and you have these types of responses. Now, these responses can be cued. If you have something like an auditory, that's why music can be very important, but it's not, of course, the only thing, right? We'll go into narrative warfare where you look at something like 9/11, which is this is narrative warfare, right? This is a history. This is a complete transformation of cause and effect of every individual in the entire culture. And this is the level that this goes on to, but you can see it on the macro level with I'm talking about the music and all this stuff. And what's kind of funny and interesting is the local shops I was going to when I was sort of doing a little bit of research for this show, all of them. I just went to this gas station today. They all stopped playing music. I don't know. It's just they stopped playing the background rock and stuff. I don't know why, but it was really weird. After I did the show last week, I just went to bed. All of them.
Now they have they have your license plate recorded. When they see you coming down the street, they just automatically shut it off and play something else.
Well, it's silent. They were all shut off.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, next time you go in, they'll probably be playing the same droning mind control you're used to, and then you can relax.
Well, no, I mean, I remember the last time which kind of inspired me to do that thing, they were playing like Depeche Mode and The Cure, right? I walk into the gas station, I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to hear The Cure again. I really don't.
Well, come on, boys don't cry about that.
I've suffered enough in my life, but in that's when it really hit me. That's when this whole topic hit me. I'm like, this brings back, how am I connecting to this?
Well, it brings back all your junior high and high school memories, and boom, you're right there, and the nostalgia of that Depeche Mode concert you went to when you were 16 or whatever,
Yeah, exactly. And this is the definition of the behavioral state as a connected set of equivalent histories, which results in situational control or situational controlling stimuli. So this is, again, these are a lot of technical stuff, so now when it really gets brought out to the fore and clearly described, we look at John Lilly, right? Now, but didn't you think it's interesting that Burroughs is talking in detail? He talks about different experiments. I mean, in some of this stuff, I mean, his knowledge of, neuroscience warfare stuff, I was like, dude, I'm pretty impressed, Okay, let me just say, he talks about sending a thought. 9 years, this is Burroughs again. Lasers can move satellites in and out of orbit. They could push someone in front of a truck. Is this knowledge in the best hands? 9 years ago in Amsterdam, I talked to a Dutch chemist, wonder who that might be, who told me they had synthesized a drug infinitely more powerful than LSD and could not take the responsibility of testing this drug on human subjects owing to the owing to the possibility of residual brain damage. Subsequently, I heard that the drug has now been released to official agencies in America. This may well be the non-lethal nerve gas being used in Vietnam. And so this is done during the Vietnam War. Okay. Recently I heard someone connected with a laser research project. What you heard someone, you're hanging out with your friend there, Bill, connected by the U.S. Navy. They can actually send a thought. Some years ago, experiments in Norway indicated the possibility of activating speech patterns directly in the brain by means of electromagnetic fields. Hearing voices, the black box, which develops positive ions, enabling anyone within its range to perform at a high level of efficiency without fatigue, was used by the U.S. Army and kept secret for 10 years. Is it on the market yet? Important research that could be used to free the human spirits is being monopolized by paltry intellects in the name of national security. Okay, but again, this is Burroughs. He is extremely aware of this stuff and cutting edge stuff. I mean, we can go back to the time he conducted this interview. How many people were aware of this stuff, right? I mean, this stuff was not common knowledge, especially infrasound, right? Infrasound, because there was no way to really register that until you have, much more like, types of PET scans and things like that. Psychedelic art. So you create the happenings. The happenings, they give the people a guide to understand the sensory experience, right? And psychedelia as a means to free individuals from their psychic conditioning. And this is quoting from another article, but for Hollingshead, Tim Leary, and many other leaders of the psychedelic counterculture, the rational mind needed to be transcended and recalibrated.
That should be restated as the Harvard Social Relations Department, aka CIA. That they were all out of that same department, you know.
Yeah. They did not cancel passivity in the face of media, however, but an active search for and construction of immersive media environments that could expand consciousness and enable the rational mind to be reprogrammed. Like Isaac and Asimov's, the psychedelic counterculturists drew on popular cybernetic texts, aided by interpreters like Marshall McLuhan, Buckminster Fuller, and Jing Youngblood. Even Timothy Leary, who promoted taking LSD as a non-parallel instrument of enlightenment, suggested in his 1965 paper, Languages, Energy Systems Sent and Received, that collages of film, images, and sound might be used to communicate and reconstruct one's transcendent mind-altering experience for others. So what we have here is the research onto internal cognitive spaces done through LSD, done through psychedelics, right? And then this being positioned into media experiences itself, right? So, the movie The Kingsman, an example, is so much, you can sort of induce these type of states through visual, auditory stimuli and images, right? So you have this roadmap of the consciousness, this roadmap of what John Lilly calls metaprogramming the human biocomputer. You have certain metaprograms, right? Dynamic, right? These dynamic systems. They're self-metaprograms. And so, yeah, so anyways, gosh, I just got to try to blast through this, man. It's kind of hard, but hey, it's just, well, that's so Lilly is super interesting, man, because Lilly, so I'll just read some of the people. This is the original copy, 1972, but this was fun. The guy that published this, the quote on the back is Ralph Metzner from the Whole Earth catalog.
Well, Ralph Metzner, speaking of the Harvard Social Relations Department that we haven't mentioned for like a minute and a half, he, of course, worked with Tim Leary and Michael Hollingshead and Aldous Huxley and everybody, and helped to promote all of this. One of the many MK Ultra doctors we've proudly exposed here at Gnostic Media.
Yeah. And so basically, just as a to understand this book, right, which I think is a core text to kind of understanding all these things, right? So I threw a lot of stuff out there, and I do have the hard data, at least in terms of deployment of the stuff. But basically, so he was working for the National Institute of Mental Health, and the movie Altered States is based on his experiences, right, with the flotation tanks, taking LSD, ketamine, communing with dolphins, and all this stuff, right? But he was working for the National Institute of Mental Health when he was doing this. Okay, programming and metaprogramming in the human biocomputer. And so, 1949, the ideas were first formulated through Britton Chance, and then we have this connection with the computer development and Alan Turing, et cetera, et cetera. And basically, let me just, and then he went to, he worked at Edgewood Arsenal, Maryland Psychiatric Research Center. He worked at the Esalen Institute. And let's see. So yeah, he was working at the Edgewood Arsenal, Sanford. And let me just see let me find this quote where he, crap, I should have marked that. He basically presented this stuff.
Along with Andrea Puharich, Dr. Sasha Shulgin, Frank Zappa's father was there, etc. We can't leave out Frank Zappa,
Yeah, no, I think this is at the back of the book here. He just says where he presented it. He gives thanks to all these places, and this is super interesting. I find it here. That was but yeah, Maryland Psychiatric Research Center perform research but Stuart, the guy that put this out, Stuart Brand of the Whole Earth catalog, reviewed the work, and and then they started putting this out.
One
in
of
the
our
community.
can you still hear me?
Yes, I can. Yep.
All right, because for some reason the internet connection just dropped for a second. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
No,
I'm
I
trying
wasn't.
to-
Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything other than it dropped, but it's picked back up. You just want me to help you buy more time while you look for that citation.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? While you're doing that, people, please donate. We've had $37 come in. Thanks to those of you who donated from the chat, as well as from the Gnostic Media website. Hans also has a donate button at hansutter.com. Please support Hans's work as well. And also, Pete is talking about in the chat about people using the brain on the Gnostic Media website, which is the blue thing I keep showing up there. That's how we track data and everything. It's not just a bunch of guilt by associations. You have to go through and read the research, but we try to track it all in there. Looks like Hans is ready. So anyway, go ahead, Hans.
Yeah, this is actually on the first. It's like right there on the the first page here. It says, based on a series of seminars given at the Department of Psychiatry, School of Medicine, John Hopkins University, University of California, and it's actually written California instead of California, Los Angeles University, University of Minnesota, at the medical seminar, Edgewood Arsenal, and at the Jewish Theological Seminary, New York, 1966. So this is where all this was presented, right?
Yeah. Of course, we're always surprised to see that connection come in. Not.
I certainly am. But anyways, so what we have here, we're talking about the act, not only the implication of what in psychological terms are complexes, right? Behavioral complexes, neuroses, right? But even looking at genetic activation and deactivation of particular genetic material, right? So he's talking about genetic level, right? He talks about, in other words, we should experiment with all the vast parameters in which we have evolved and their variations in order to seek optimal survival values of these for the embryo, fetuses, and children who do not survive under our peculiarly narrow range of values of these parameters. To change lethals into optimals seems possible and even probable with imaginative and thorough research. But so he's talking about even pre-birth effect of genetic material in pre-birth, the general purpose construction kit of the human genetic code, mind-brain direct computer interface. So, I mean, basically, okay, we have, changing the rules, but okay, the human computer interlock, right? So he's talking about networks creating genetic determinism, going over genetic determinism, and creating a human computer interlock. So it must be understood that the whole time, so he starts out with this quote from R. Rosh Ashby, "What is mind? The general purpose computer is a machine in which the operator can prescribe for any internal state of the machine and for any given condition affecting it, what state it shall go to next. All behaviors are at the operator's disposal. A program with the mechanism forms a program with the machine forms a mechanism that will show any thinkable behavior. This generalization has largely solved the main problems of the brain so far as its objective behavior is concerned. The nature of its subjective aspects may be left to the next generation, if only to reassure them that there are still major scientific worlds left to conquer." Right. But so basically we are looking at the movement from external conditioned Pavlovian behavior, right, to the use of, obviously, with psychedelic experience, you start to go into this inner terrain, right? You start to be able to map and model interior conscious functioning, right? And so this LSD research is that, the storage the creation of meta programs. So, quote, the human computer has stored program properties. A stored program is a set of instructions which are placed in the memory storage system of the computer and which control the computer when orders are given for that program to be activated. The activator can either be another system within the same computer or someone or situation outside the computer. So we are just these programmable computers. As Bro said, we're just tape machines. This is from page 6. These are just the different basic tenets. The human computer, within limits yet to be defined, has self-programming properties and other persons' programming properties. This assumption follows naturally from the previous one, but brings in the system within the mind that operate at one level of abstraction above that of programming. As shown in figure 1, one literally has to talk about self-metaprogramming as well as self-programming. This does not mean the entire computer can be thought of as the self. Only small portions of the systems operating a given instance are taken up by self-metaprograms. So already built-in instinctual programs, etc. And then self-metaprogramming is done in the meta-command language. The resulting programming starts and continues below the threshold of awareness. Similarly, each computer has a certain level of ability in programming others, not self. So this gets kind of deep, but what we're talking about is metaprogramming, right? Metaprogramming creates entire systems that allow a whole range of other subprograms or conditioned behavioral responses. Let's look at, for example, statistics of the use of drugs and alcohol associated with and smoking associated with popular music and film and television. Lots of statistics done with that. We have a situational awareness. We have a type of environmental connection or stimuli. And especially if you go back to the Princeton Radio Project of how the radio, the television takes over the space of the family drawing room, right? The patriarch, the father's replaced by the external media influence, right? We see that all through the rock and roll, the revolution. You destabilize the traditional, structure of authority. The authority becomes this box, becomes this media implanting these codes, right? And this idea of metaprogramming is an entire system in which all these programs can run, right? And that's exactly what is happening when we look at Hollingshead and Leary and Burroughs, is that they are, you look at the larger metaprogram, which is being deployed for the entire society, and their escape mechanism is actually strengthening that metaprogram, right? But within a single metaprogram, you have all these different subsets, right? And then you have all these trigger points, right? Associational. And again, a lot of this, you get on a deeper level, this does go into your own personal psychology as well. It's not, again, that, you're like some kind of Jason Bourne, and you're going to hear, Born to be Wild, and you're going to, jump on a motorcycle and start killing people. But, if you look at the range, the spread of these things within game theory, there's a lot of predictable outcomes that are happening. And again, the core point is this can function. The resulting programming, once a meta program is set in, the resulting programming occurs below the threshold of awareness. That is, once you've sort of set up these type of systems, then below the threshold of normal awareness, you can keep inserting different types of programs.
This reminds me, excuse me. Did you see this thing? This guy last week ran into the fire at Burning Man?
No.
Yeah, well, when they finally burned the man, this guy, 41 now, I'm forgetting the name off the top of my head, Anthony, Tim, something like that. Anyway, he runs through and just jumps into the fire and dies. But I couldn't help but thinking that, one of these meta messages was programmed in there, mixing some MDMA or something. And, they, out of 70,000 people that are there, I'm guessing that they're just seeing if, they can get one to go and jump into the damn fire.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And then let's look at Burning Man. That's connected with what? Wicker Man, right? Which is
right.
With the the absolutely hilariously pitiful actor Nick Cage with a repeat of that.
No, the original 70s one was way better, but yeah.
No, what I'm saying is, look at that. That's what I'll get into is you look at the recycling of culture.
Yeah.
These movies being redeployed, right? But the Wicker Man, the Burning Man, the Wicker Man is this human sacrifice, right? You have this hapless, goy, white male, whatever, being led into this thing and then being sacrificed for the good of the species. And he represents, in a certain way, like sort of the conservative values, the kind of, functioning social values, right? Of actually a policeman who's not, some, psychotic, guy who just shoots like some guy in Ohio. This is hilarious. A small town in Ohio. This guy set up a camera to film traffic stops, and the police officer just shot him like 3 times, and it turned out they knew each other. It was a town of like a couple hundred people, right? But he's like, "Oh, don't fire him. He didn't mean to do it." It's like, but this stuff, exactly what you said, Jan, is that guy running into the fire. There's all these gradations, right, of how these types of things are running and being run. Okay. And, again, you could go into, I talked a little bit about some of that these aspects, right, of, the very detailed, neuroscience stuff, but I'll read a little bit more. This is number 15. The older classification of fields of human endeavor in science are redefinable with this view of the human brain and human mind. For example, the term suggestibility has often been used in a limited context of programming and being programmed by someone outside. Hypnotic phenomena are seen when a given computer allows itself to be more or less completely programmed by another one. Metaprogramming is considered a more inclusive term than suggestibility, but he's defining suggestibility, right? Suggestibility, hypnotic suggestion, as metaprogramming, except it's much more encompassing. He says, quote, metaprogrammers consider sources, inputs, outputs, and the central processes rather than just the end results. Okay, so if we want to look at the dynamic implant, then we have here, the mind is the sum of the programs and metaprograms, i.e. the software of the human computer. So we have the human biocomputer, in a sense, half-life for different metaprograms. Here's what he talks about as half-life, right? So you have the stimulus, right? Imagine you're at a rave, right? You're at a rave, you're on E, you got that techno blast, and you go into this ecstatic state, right? What you're doing is inserting that type of program which has a half-life, okay? An unmodified half-life can turn up for certain kinds of programs subject to antithetical metaprograms, i.e. orders to weaken, modify, or replace a program act as antithetical metaprograms to already existing programs or metaprograms. So, not to get too complex here, but you look at these are antithetical. You have programs and counter programs. You have a half-life of these things they can be replayed, visualized, felt, thought, elicited from the memory storage, on and on. But and then one other quick quote here. Apparently not all programs are revisable. Certain programs become permanently embedded in the mind brain. You cannot revise them. They'll always be there. They'll always be operative.
You're always going to know the lyrics when you hear Imagine, and you're going to get the whole damn song, the whole Communist Manifesto just popping right into your head, and that's always going to be there.
Yeah, and then I'll just read one little quote too about this.
And we're at an hour and 20, so anytime you're done.
I got it. I'll just wrap up here. The reward-punishment dichotomy or spectrum is critically important within the human-computer operations, right? So first term, spontaneous occurrences, general-purpose properties of human metaprogramming, and et cetera. So he's talking, and then the examples he gives are types of weird psychological disturbances and different meta programs. In a sense, a meta program is also a narrative, right? A narrative. You look at narrative warfare, so something like 9/11, War on Terror, other types of things. The 1960s Cultural Revolution, white privilege. These are types of subsets of larger narratives, right, that fit within these meta programming systems. And so, what we have here is, I could go on and on, but this is. I mean, I didn't get a chance to get to all the data I have of all the, statistical analysis, all this stuff. But
you want to do a part 4, or are we going to wrap it up here?
Well, it'd have to be when I get back. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, it wouldn't be for 3 or 4 weeks out, but if you want to do a part 4 conclusion, we can.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Because so let me say, I always end up. I thought this was like super tight. I had it in 1 hour. I ended up going over, but that's okay. So hopefully, and if you have any questions, hopefully I was able to a little bit bring in a little sharper focus what I was talking about. Right?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely getting more and more clear, and it's just, I would recommend people go back and play this whole series again to grasp the finer intricacies, but, they need to do that with all of our 20, 30 some odd shows anyway.
Yeah, and let me just say what I do want to get into, which probably we can focus on the last part, is the fact that these kind of things, right, this type of operation, you can really start to observe it in yourself, because basically this is my own work. I'm not basing this on someone else, whatever. But these, what I call liminal or threshold states, right? These are states where you're kind of in between doing something, or you're waiting for something, where and these are when types of these things can reassert themselves. And I think a lot of it is interconnecting with our own personal histories and how these kind of become intertwined and enmeshed within them, right? And it's very possible to start to bring conscious awareness to that. The first thing, though, is it will, at least in my experience, is that you might get some kind of, a little bit discomfort. It may be very minor, but there may be some cues like, I just want to forget. I'm just going to forget. If you can go through that, you're really going to start to have an opening up of this stuff, because in a certain way, this is sort of the soft way to open up and actually really start to reground ourselves in our own lives, in our own history. And because I think what's been stolen from us more than anything else is our own time. I mean, like, what's the music of this time? Everything is I'm gonna swear, everything is fucking recycled. Everything is being recycled and reimplanted, and it's like, this also influences us to not be grounded and take and have enough of a purpose to really encounter our own lives and take charge of it. So I think that this is a way to do it that doesn't involve, intensive psychotherapy, but it's something you could start to observe it around you. And again, it's just operating on, and you'll start to see people, how they're being conditioned. The conditioned response mechanism in the society at large. So that's
Father Time, Chronos, Saturn worship. It's all the same. Moloch is right in there. Baal. So that, it's like discovering that they've rewritten history, and then you throw a false history back into time, like Joseph Scaliger, like we've covered with Jacob, and then it's like in Back to the Future. This has a ripple effect forward where it changes the historical narrative, and people follow this new false history, this new false narrative. So, when people think of time machines, they don't even need a time machine. All they need is to create that false historical narrative. So what we're seeing here is yet another way that they're able to manipulate time, for Chronos, for Saturn, for the worshippers of the Black Rock.
Yeah, and exactly. And as I'll get into next episode, addictive behaviors, right, are examples of short-circuited responses, right? When you get into an addictive cycle, whether it's sex addiction, whether it's video game addiction, whether it's porn addiction, which is
right,
you are locked into this conditioned temporal control cycle, right? And when that's control cycle hits, you're in that time. So in a sense, your time is being sacrificed. Your life is literally the most valuable thing you have is this time, right? And that's being eaten up and sacrificed in various ways in a certain way. And so in my opinion, the present, the true present, right? When you start to go into that, this requires somatic bodily awareness, but it contains past, present, and future. So it's not just this freaking out now where I'm just, oh yeah, but it contains all these times. And so that's going to try to get into it. I think that's really what has been usurped from us. And that's why I think even like stuff like the power of now, that just creates a further type of fragmentation, right? Oh, I got to be here now. I'm here now. I'm here. Be here now. It's always gone. It's like, dude, as soon as you do that, because the narrative mechanisms, once you're in the present, then you can start to elucidate these narrative mechanisms. And again, the importance of these mechanisms cause people to go to war. They cause violence. They cause people, live fast, die young. How many people, probably you and I know personally, have died before their time because they embraced this ethos, right?
Absolutely.
This is a narrative, but you can see that narrative is functioning as part of a meta program. And then you have subsystem triggers, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll just leave with that.
All right. And thanks to those of you who donated during the show. I think we got about $35-40 in. Please donate to the show. Thanks for listening. GnosticMedia.com, HansUtter.com. Please check out his website and support his work as well. Hans, any last statements before we go off the air for tonight?
No, thanks everybody for listening. I certainly appreciate any donations. I mean, it does take a lot of my time to do this, and in fact, it kind of works against. I mean, it's
antithetical to your career to expose all of this,
Yeah, both academic or music. But you know what? I mean, I figure that you only live once. But I just invite people to start to notice also intuition but the key thing is not to create I'll just say one last thing here. There's a type of counter. There are mechanisms that will start to create feedback loops in your mind when you start to push against some of these things. So take a very light approach, but I'd say that as I'll get into it, this is a great way to unravel some of this in a way that you're not having to relive your childhood and all that other psychoanalysis BS. But I think this is quite interesting, and it's I feel that at least myself, I feel more empowered already just being able to find a real mechanism to return to my own present and return to much greater sense of who I am, and being able to say, wait, even someone as much research as I've done, wait, there are certain things, I still have some of these things running, and I can, and so all of us do that. That's part of being part of a culture, but this is a culture that's implanting interconnected messages that are antithetical to human survival, freedom, and creativity.
Absolutely. Hans, thank you so much. Good night, everybody. Let me find the off button, and see you all next week. Next week we have Clint Richardson coming on, and I think the week after that will be Bill Jocelyn, and then you'll probably be back sometime after that. Good night, everyone. Take care until then.